Hey everyone, my name's Cody. This is my wife Jillian. Here making another video. Again, talking about all things baby and sleeping.
Sleeping babies.
Yeah, sleeping babies. This time we're going to talk about the first 48 hours. So post delivery, what can you expect? What's it like? And that sort of thing. So let's dive in.
So there's so many different variables when it comes to what those first 48 hours are going to look like, depending on where you deliver, what your delivery was like. But we're just going to focus on the sleeping aspect for you and baby. Those first 48 hours, there is no schedule. It is all about taking care of you and taking care of that baby, and making sure that both of you, or if you have multiples, that everyone's just being taken care of and nourished. So honestly, it's all about feeding in those first 48 hours. It's getting comfortable with breastfeeding, or however you choose to feed, and making sure the baby's getting enough. Typically, doctors will recommend feeding every 2.5 to 3 hours to make sure the baby is getting enough. Obviously, in those first few hours and first few days, they're not consuming a lot. So that's not necessarily what's important. It's just getting that consistency down, getting that familiarity with them. I mean, honestly, they're learning. They're learning to eat. You're learning to feed them.
So let's talk about, well, not me. I don't have experience with breastfeeding, but my wife Jillian does. So let's talk about breastfeeding. What has it been like with your first three kids? Our first three kids. What has it been like in those first 48 hours? What do you wish that you had kind of learned, or I guess what have you learned over the last couple?
Yeah. So I think for first time mom, breastfeeding for me was one of the more overwhelming experiences. I thought it was something that would come relatively naturally. I mean, it's my body, it's my baby, why wouldn't it? And that really wasn't the case for us and our first daughter, Quinn. It took a lot of learning, and thankfully we were in a hospital that had a lactation specialist on hand. She was extremely helpful, just helping me understand my nipples, and that, Quinn was
let's just go straight to it. You had an issue with...
So this is me. I have a nipple that tends to be a little more like inverted. So it's not easy for her to latch. So my nipple wasn't like protruding very much.
So Quinn was, fumbling around trying to find it. She couldn't really find it. And that created a lot of tension because we couldn't get her to eat, even though she's crying. We're trying to get her to eat. We're doing everything we can. The lactation specialist is in there. And so it created a lot of anxiety because, again, you're sleep deprived, but you're like also wanting to help your baby. And so for us, Quinn, it was really hard to figure things out. Like, why isn't she latching? Why isn't she eating? And she went like 12 hours without eating.
She went too long.
Yeah, she went way too long without eating. But on the backside of this, what we did find
so again,
that worked. She
was super helpful. What helped me is this little nifty guy called Nipple Guard, Nipple Shield. I'm not even sure. Like $7 on Amazon, I think.
And you can get like a pack or 2 or 3. It looks big. Honestly, it looks really big.
It's wildly
especially
helpful.
When you compare it against like an actual nipple.
And even if your nipples are not weird like mine, it's great to have because your nipples are sore. You're feeding every 2.5, 3 hours.
Do you feel like this guard helps keep your nipples from like chafing and like getting...
Yeah, it keeps them in...
Because it's a plastic protector, so it basically acts as like a larger nipple, so it's easier for the baby to find it if you have issues with that. And for us, seriously, this worked. This was a game changer. It worked amazingly for Quinn, and she's used it since because that problem didn't go away.
Yeah.
So...
And it's something I've shared with a lot of friends because, again, those first few hours, not only have you delivered your baby, hello, trauma in a different way, there's so many new things going on. Your baby's crying because they're hungry. There's so much comfort in knowing how to respond to that versus, again, with our daughter Quinn, first-time parents, I wasn't familiar with inverted nipples or nipple guards or any of this. So incredibly overwhelming. You know your baby's crying. You want to help them. I couldn't help her. I couldn't feed her. I didn't know how to do it. Anyway, that's the point of these videos, is hopefully to extend some experience and things that have helped us.
Experiential knowledge, maybe? No? Okay.
Anyway, so those first 48 hours, it's getting that baby fed and taking care of both of you.
Because that baby, if that baby gets just a little bit of food in him or her,
they're out.
They're going to go out, and that means you can rest and sleep as well.
They are so sleepy. I mean, really for the first few months, but those first few days, they've been through crazy trauma. So they're exhausted, but like all of us, needing that nourishment, needing to eat. So that's really your focus. Every 2.5, 3 hours is pretty much what's recommended feeding time. I know it's super tempting because they're so sleepy to let it ride. It's like, why would I wake a sleeping baby? Well, because it could get ugly after that. And they really just need nourishment.
And you have to meet typically a certain threshold. Your baby's weight's got to meet a certain threshold before you're able to be released from the hospital. So if you let your baby go, if by chance your baby can sleep 4 or 5 hours, which is highly unlikely, but if you fall into that temptation of just letting them sleep, they don't get enough nourishment, then you're going to have to stay at the hospital longer, because typically babies they're a certain weight when they're born, and they lose that weight, sometimes a pound, sometimes half a pound. And then they have to gain a certain amount back, so that it's kind of like a red flag for the nurses, if you're not at a certain threshold before. So that's tempting to do, but just try to get into that process of feeding every 2 or 3 hours.
If you're in a hospital, you're going to have nurses up in your room all the time.
Yeah,
and they're probably going to be bugging you to feed the baby anyway. So don't even worry about that. That will happen.
So let's pivot to, since we're on breastfeeding, let's pivot to the other key thing that we kind of discovered after Quinn, and that is pumping.
Sure. So one more side note. These first 48 hours, do not worry about a schedule of any sort. If you're watching this, my assumption is that you are interested in some sort of schedule to get your baby to sleep. Our focus is on sleeping. This is not the time. All of that will come these first few days.
Every other time is that time, but not in the first 48.
There is no schedule. So sleep when you can. Sleep when they are sleeping. This is their sleepiest time of life. So take advantage.
Live
of their lives. So sleep when they're sleeping. That is the hardest part for me. I'm constantly doing something and feeling like I need to be doing something. But hopefully you have help, friends, family, someone who's helping when the baby comes. So don't be afraid to ask for help. So yes, the other thing that we have found incredibly helpful throughout sleep training our babies, but especially this first 48 hours, is pumping and using a bottle. A lot of people have opinions about this with nipple confusion.
I don't think it's real. We're just going to be straight up. We don't think it's real.
It feels a little like a myth.
And I will say this. We haven't had one nurse or practitioner or whoever say, ooh, don't do the bottle. But like before we had Quinn, there was this weird, and I don't even know where we got it from, but it's kind of widespread. Friends and stuff like that. But there was this weird, like, ooh, you don't want to give them a passy too soon. They're going to have nipple confusion and they're not going to be able to eat. Or you don't want to give them a bottle too soon.
If you don't know what we mean by nipple confusion, because you might, because I didn't know. It's basically that the baby will become so comfortable and so familiar with the passy or the nipple of a bottle,
which acts as a nipple,
will no longer breastfeed.
Yeah.
Which could present problems if breastfeeding.
So we heard like, don't give them a passy or a bottle in the first month or few weeks or whatever. We have just found that to not be true. We have slowly given our babies bottles earlier and earlier. And with our last one, Collins, who was born 7 weeks ago, in the hospital, the second night that we were there, or I guess second day we were there, we immediately gave her a bottle, and she hasn't had any issues. So
we would honestly love to just give a whole lot of tips and tricks and like favorite products, but that's not what this is about. I do, because this is going to relate back to the sleeping, I do just want to mention, I would highly recommend bringing your breast pump. If you have one, want one, get one.
It is a scam to the highest degree.
Okay, he's focused on your bill.
No, look, here's the deal. If you don't bring your own breast pump, which if you're breastfeeding, you need to pump to try to get the supply flowing and all that stuff. So you need to pump. So if you use theirs, I promise you, I saw my bill. It was, now granted, we didn't have to pay for all of this because of medical, divvying up and whatever. It was over $400 to rent out a breast pump for like a day. For like a day. Yeah, and we had one at home. So we had no idea. We didn't even think about it. It's not that we didn't want to bring it. We didn't even think about it. So if you are breastfeeding, bring your pump for sure. And it just makes it a lot easier.
It gives us a lot of peace of mind because, well, for several reasons. Yes, your bill. But also, bottles are huge because then the feeding is not just on mommy.
For sure.
Daddy can help. You can.
I don't feel like some helpless individual. I can actually do some of the feedings.
And you can each get more than 2.5, 3 hours of sleep at a time, which is crucial. So anyway, long story short.
Another little tidbit is that you're able to, and of course this is with all bottles, you're able to see how much they eat. So oftentimes really in the hospital, the nurse will ask, how long did they breastfeed for? How much.
If you're breastfeeding, you don't know how much they're getting.
Yeah, or how much they're getting. So a bottle's an easy way. And, when they're that young, they're getting like half of an ounce maybe, and they're full.
It's so minimal. And your nurses, doulas, midwives will all like help you through this. You will not go into this like totally blind. Again, these are just tips from our experiences that have been super helpful. So anyway, we have a Medela, I think that's how you say it, pump. 9 out of 10 pumps are covered by insurance, so that's fun.
Yeah.
We also, with our second, we got a Willow pump, a cordless pump. There's so many now.
Game changer.
Because anyway, pumping is kind of like a full-time job, if that's the route you take. So anyway, our Medela came with these super handy little bottles and this awesome nipple. It's super small.
We've literally had this since our first.
So going on 4 years now. Awesome. Super durable.
But it comes with like a pack of bottles. So it comes in smaller bottles.
It comes with a
variety of sizes. Then smaller than
that.
Yeah, a variety of sizes.
Anyway, the whole point is when pumping, and again, those first few days, I mean, you're not going to get much milk at all. It's going to be so small. And it's really going to be colostrum, especially those first 48 hours. Your milk probably won't come in until after that. But we've found pumping to be wildly helpful. Again, pass off some of the responsibility. And yeah, just the earlier that you can introduce the bottle, the easier it is later on.
Passy, same way. It helps them get acclimated to sucking and getting used to that, because you essentially are teaching them how to suck, which is just mind-blowing in and of itself.
They don't know how to do
but
that.
a Passy's able to help with that while they're sleeping, which is, a win-win.
Yeah,
so
I've personally never quite understood the fear of the Passy, because it's simply just a comfort for them, and it helps them get to sleep. Now, I guess I could see that in regards to later on with self-soothing. You want to help them like teach themselves to go to sleep on their own without help. That I can understand, but we've just found them super helpful, again, even in the hospital. If they're just a little fussy, can't figure it out, anytime they just need a little comforting, the Passy's been really helpful. Thankfully, our kids haven't had like any weird attachment to their Passy by like age 1.
Oh,
and on even like before that, it's like they'll take it. If it's hit or miss. It's like irrelevant to them. So,
as we wrap up, final thoughts.
Really, the main thing is just take care of yourself and the baby the first few hours.
Don't worry about a schedule. The first 2 days, introduce bottles, Passys as early as you can. We, in our experience, have not found that to be an issue at all, and same with any feedback from practitioners. They haven't had an issue with it. So it helps kind of divvy up responsibilities, which is great. So yeah.
I think that's it.
That's all we got. Until next time.